Hi everybody and welcome back to the Oracle Golden Gate course. In this lecture I'm going to talk about data selection and filtering part 2. In this lecture you will learn how to use the built-in functions to perform column tests. And also you will learn how to use them to manipulate column data. Oracle Golden Gate provides a list of built-in functions that can be used for complex data filtering and transformation. All the built-in functions are prefixed with the @ symbol. As you will see in this lecture, Golden Gate built-in functions can be used for column tests and evaluations, date format and mappings, string and number conversion, string manipulation, and strings or numbers comparison. In this lecture, I will introduce the most commonly used built-in functions and demonstrate examples of using them. This is a list of Oracle Golden Gate built-in functions that can be used for testing column values. If built-in, as in all programming languages, is used for testing a condition. If you want to test a series of conditions, you can use eval function or case function. CallStat is an indicator of one of the values, null, missing, or invalid. CallTest function is used to test if a column is present, missing, null, or invalid. Val1of function returns true if the given column value contains one of the values in the given list. We will look at examples of using those functions. The if function returns one of two values based on a condition. For numeric comparisons, use the numeric operators like equal, greater than, or less than. For character comparison, use one of the character comparison functions. You will learn about those functions later in this lecture. The example in the slide returns the total value if the total value is greater than 0. Otherwise, it returns 0. CallStat function is an indicator that returns the values missing, null, or invalid. The first example in the slide is assigning null value to the address column. The second example will assign null value to the unit price if the price is less than 0. Usually, this function is used in conjunction with other testing functions. You will see later some examples of that. CallTest function is used to test if a column value is present, null, missing, or invalid. The function returns true or false based on the value you are testing. The example in the slide is testing the AMT column. If it is missing or invalid, it will return 0. Otherwise, the AMT value is assigned to the amount column. This is another example of using CallTest and CallStat together. The example is checking if the quantity value is present and it is greater than 2000, its value is assigned to the large quantity columns. Otherwise, it will assign null to the large quantity column. The examples in the slide are examples of using the case, val1of, and eval functions. I think they are all self-descriptive. I don't need to explain much about them. This is a list of 3 functions that you use to deal with dates. Date function is used to control the format of the date. DateDiff calculates the difference between two dates. and dateNow returns the current date and time. I think the easiest way to understand using the date function is by examples. In the first example, we have a year value saved in the env-year column, the month value saved in the env-mm column, and the day value saved in the env-dd column. The date function is used to convert those values in those columns into a single value of date data type, and this value is mapped to date column in the target database. The second example is showing something similar, but with the time included in the process in that case. In the third example, we have the data and time data in a single source column named numeric date, but its format in the source is different from the format accepted by the target. The example is showing you how to convert that numeric value into date type that is understood by the target column. Oracle Golden Gate has a list of functions to handle string data. Compute is probably the special function among them, but it is used to perform arithmetic operations. I think you would be familiar with the rest of the functions because they are similar to the functions that you would see in SQL language to handle string data. As you can see in the list, we have functions to convert a string into number, concatenate two or more strings, make a comparison between two strings, extract specific character from a string, find a character or more in a string, and obtain the number of characters in a string. We also have functions to trim strings data from left, right, or both sides. A function to substitute one string from another within a column. A function to convert a number into a string, and a function to change the case of a string. It should be easy for you to work with those functions because they are very similar to the string functions in SQL language. You can refer to the Golden Gate reference documentation if you need further information about any of them. I will demonstrate some examples in the next slide. The first example in the slide is concatenating the last name and the first name columns to derive the value of the full name column in the target table. The second example is extracting the area code from the phone column value. They are the first three characters of the phone value. The third example is showing you how to use the compute function. It calculates the multiplication of the unit price and the quantity. The filter parameter will take only the rows where the unit price times the quantity is greater than 10,000. This is a list of some commonly used miscellaneous functions in Golden Gate. GetEnv function returns information about the Golden Gate environment, trail file header, trail record header, last replicated operation, and the lag value. You will see examples of using this function when I talk about tokens in a separate lecture. GetVal function extracts values from a stored procedure or query so that they can be used as input to a filter or call map. You will see examples of this function in this lecture. The range function divides the workload into multiple groups of data. This is used when you configure multiple replicate processes and you distribute the workload among them. Personally, I prefer to use the coordinated replicate instead of using the range function. It provides the same advantage with less effort. I will cover the coordinated replicate in a separate lecture. Token functions retrieves token data that is stored in the user token area of the Oracle Golden Gate record header. I will cover this topic in a separate lecture. So among all those functions, only getVal will be covered in this lecture. You will learn more about the rest in separate lectures. SQLExec is a very powerful function in Golden Gate. You use it to execute SQL queries and DML statements, execute stored procedures, or execute database commands. In other words, SQLExec is capable of communicating with the database. Obviously, this extends the capabilities of the Oracle Golden Gate because it allows you to use the database language capability in an Oracle Golden Gate parameter file. This function supports the databases Oracle, SQL Server, Teradata, Sybase, and DB2. SQLExec can run as a standalone function or within a table or map parameters. If you use it within table or map parameters, it supports running queries and stored procedures, but not database commands. When SQLExec is used with procedures, it can pass and accept parameters. To execute a procedure within a SQLExec function, use the format as shown in the slide. After the SPN name keyword, you put the procedure name that you want to call. After the ID keyword, you put any ID characters to give a logical ID name to your execution. After that, you pass the values of the input parameters of your procedure. To run a query or DML in SQLExec, you use the query keyword. Please notice there is a space between the first quote and the query code, and between the end of the query code and the closing single quote. You're going to use the procedure in the slide with the SQLExec function. This procedure accepts one input parameter and returns one output parameter. It then obtains the title of the given employee ID and saves it in the output parameter. This example is showing how the getTitle procedure can be called by the SQLExec function. The parameter p_employee_ID is assigned the value of the employee ID column in the hr.employees table. The emp title column is assigned the value returned by the procedure. As you see in the example, to get the value of the output parameter in the procedure, you use the getVal function. You pass the procedure name followed by dot and then followed by the name of the output parameter. This code is simply obtaining the title of the changed row and updates the row title column. This is an example of how to use SQLExec function to run a query. It does the same functionality as the example shown in the previous slide. The select statement comes after the query keyword. There is a space at the beginning of the select statement code and at the end of it. The select statement example is using the variable vEmployeeID. The value of the column employee ID is passed to that variable. The query returns the value title col, and that value can be obtained using the getVal function. In the example, it has been assigned to emp title column. In summary, you use the colon sign to create variables in your query. You use params keyword to pass values to the variables. And you use getVal to get the value retrieved by your query. If you want to run a general SQL command in the database that is not tied to any specific table operations, you can use the SQLExec function as a standalone parameter statement. In this execution format, you can issue a database command, not only queries and procedures. The syntax of using SQLExec as a standalone parameter is straightforward. You just put the command code between single quotes. Again, observe that we have spaces in case of running a query. The slide is showing examples of using SQLExec as a standalone parameter to execute procedures, queries, and database commands. Notice the last example. It used an option with this parameter that allows the command to re-execute every specific number of seconds. This is handy if you want to rerun the same command in a frequent basis. In this lecture, you learned how to use Oracle Golden Gate built-in functions. You will gain some experience of using them in the next practice lecture. Thank you very much. See you over there.